Good morning. My name is Jim. Thank you for coming back to my channel. This is the next installment on my 2005 Chevy Tahoe project. I mentioned there was a couple things wrong with it in my first video. Things like cruise control doesn't work. I just found out my brake lights don't work. Some lady pulled up next to me next to a stoplight and let me know. So I'm beginning to think that might be the brake light stop switch on the brake pedal. I'd buy one. They're only like $25, but today's Sunday, so I'll have to do it tomorrow when the dealership's open. Today I'm working on the blower motor. The front blower motor does not work, and popular problem with those is the resistors. The little resistor switch, it's up by the blower. I'm in a parking lot, a Publix parking lot in Florida. I have a little tool challenge down here. My primary residence is in Ohio, so I had to stop at Lowe's and get some nut drivers, and I'm going to pull it off here in the parking lot. I'd stopped at Advanced Auto this morning, can I say that, to get the resistor, and apparently there's like 8 different kinds, and ironically enough they had them all in stock. And it's a funny thing about these resistors, I can go back to when I used to buy like late 60s, early 70s GM models and A-bodies, you know, the Cutlasses and the Le Mans and GTOs and Chevelles, and they were popular with my friends too. And almost every one of us had some kind of heater blower motor problem. Whether it was the blower motor, the switches were a chronic problem. They would melt, they would quit working. You'd pull the dash apart and half a good 2 or 3 inches of the wire would be melted. And we used to have contests to see who could get their switches to last the longest. And even back then, the most successful of my friends soldered the wires directly to the switch. And you would think this is a country that, I just heard that the Mars rover was only supposed to last 90 days and it lasted 15 years. You would think that company, that country that builds that Land Rover would be able over the past 40 or 50 years to improve their blower motor switches and circuitry to the point where you wouldn't have to go through this. It's not a tough project, but it's just kind of silly. So anyway, I'm going to start taking it apart, and again, it should only take a couple minutes. We'll stop at Advanced Auto and get the right one, and I head home. So I'm not sure how well you can see this, but there's 2 screws that hold on this lower cover, and the screws are 7 millimeters, and this isn't easy to do one-handed. There we go. I hate these little tabs. There we go. There's one. And the other is under here, and hopefully it's focused. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so in typical American manufacturing, we had a 7 millimeter to get the cover off, and you need a, what is this, a 7/32 to get the blower motor switch out. Figure that one out. Like, pick one, crying out loud. Alright, oh man, I guess. So I think that might tell us enough that I can get what I need at AutoZone or Advanced Auto or wherever. I know I gotta pop this blower motor out too, but I can do that there. So anyway, off to the store. Okay, so I stopped at the parts store and I got the part that I needed. And I'm going to show it to you here in a second. I just got home and got everything set up. I pulled the blower motor out. And there's just a little tab, and I'll show that to you too. So here's the blower motor, and it's a little dark under the dash. But there's a couple other videos online about how to get this out, but it's very simple. You can see this tab very easily. You just pull it down and then you rotate this counterclockwise and it pops right out. There really wasn't anything to it. This is the resistor package that you saw earlier, and I had to reach in there and I found the rest of it. You can see it's very corroded, and usually what happens once that starts rusting like that, current draw gets pretty high and your pins start getting hot. And I don't know if you can see in there. Yeah, you can see it a little bit. What is that? E and G started to melt a little bit. So, you know, this truck is 14 years old and I don't know how long it hasn't worked, but I would bet it's been a while. And so here's the new one, and everything's all shiny and new, and I'm going to go ahead and start putting this back together. This clip here, pretty simple. You just push that in and it pops out, and this just plugs in there like that. And that isn't even really going to be much of a bother. Like I said, this is just going to push up and you twist it counterclockwise to reinstall it, and it's going to snap into place. And 2 or 3, 4 screws later, and I'm going to be done. And I'm going to be able to have some heat. I'm sorry, some heat. That's an Ohioan talking. Air conditioning in Florida. It's been rather warm here last couple days, so it'll be nice to have some air in the front of the truck. The rear air still works, but the front air has not. So we'll get this blower going. I'll be good to go. Okay, I've put a flashlight on here, and hopefully this works out pretty easy, but to give you a close idea or a better idea of how this goes together, you can see the little ramp right here, maybe, where the tab rides on. So when you put the tab in here, it'll go right about here, and then you just turn it counterclockwise and it'll snap right into place. So here we go. So I turned it on, and that fan is, let's turn that off, and nothing. So I showed you the connector on the resistor and how it had gotten a little hot. Well, if you look here, you can see where it got kind of hot on this pin right here, and then if you go and look here, let's see if I can get this. See how the plastic's melted? So that just happens to be the power line, so I'm going to have to get that pin out and clean that off a little bit, because I'm sure it's just the plastic's in the way and not touching the contact. So I'm going to struggle with that for a little bit. That guide there, that white retainer, is stuck on the power side, so it probably got a little melted too. So I'm going to have to dig away at that for a little bit, and once I get it out, I'll restart. All right, friends, here we are. Talk to you later. The plug pigtail in the truck is just about ready to get destroyed because it clearly is melted together where the retainer is in the harness, and I'm tired of struggling with it, so I'm about to get a little bit rough with it and tear it apart. Ironically enough, the local auto parts store has the pigtail for that, which begs the question, you know, it's kind of funny when you think about it. They put a indicator on the air box of most new cars, so if your air filter gets dirty, you know what's happening and it indicates as such. And yet you can have a harness in your car that is melting and is potentially a fire hazard, and yet where's the fuse? Because clearly there's a large current draw. So anyway, the idiocy of automobile engineering. So I'm going to get started on this. I'm going to have to probably get a little rough with the one that's in the car. I'm not going to splice in all these wires. There's really only 2 pins that are melted, and I think even the second one isn't bad. I'd, as much as possible, prefer to use the OEM connectors. Every time you splice in something like this, you're introducing more resistance, even if it's a little bit. There obviously is a lot of current draw here. So as much as possible, I'm going to use the original wires and put them in this harness, and just for the one red power harness wire, I'll splice that in. The kit did come with some butt connectors. I would probably just splice this in here, and then when I get home, solder it, put some shrink wrap over it, make it nice. But that should be good enough to get me home, so I have some air up front too. All right, I'm going to get started. So as you look at this, you can see what the problem is. This side's coming up, but this side that has the, see if you can see that, where it's melted right there, I think it's got a nice firm grip of the retainer, so I'm going to have to yank that off with a pair of needle nose or something and snap it off as much as I can. I took a picture of what the sequence of the wires is here, and I'll replace those in the other clip that I got, and I'll cut and splice this power line here so that it's even got a fresh connector. I doubt that's going to clean up very well, but so I could be wrong. I'm a little tool challenged here, so I'm going to have to cut back some shielding with less than preferred tools. Whatever works. What a port in a storm, right? And that shielding is pretty baked. There we go. And let's cut this back a little bit. For those of you concerned I might cut myself, I wouldn't be too concerned. That's not the sharpest knife. It might scratch me a little. Alright, so let's cut this back a little bit. Boy, what a difference fresh. Not baked insulation does. So, like I said, this is temporary, but it'll get me home. Let's see if this works first. Let's see here. Yeah, it goes this way. Alright, let's see what happens. Oh, I forgot, I took the fuse out. Alright, so, give me a couple minutes to put the fuse back in. Put the resistor in, nothing. Replace the pigtail, the melted pigtail, and hook that up, still nothing. So it was time for a break. I didn't feel too bad. Those parts were obviously damaged, you know, particularly the resistor, since it was in two pieces. So went in, had a drink, relaxed for a little bit, got on the computer, kicked around, and came back out, turned the truck on, and was turning the speed switch from low to high, low to high. Well, I could hear it clicking. I could hear a relay clicking. So, well, that's a positive. I didn't have that before. So I climbed back under there. I popped the blower motor, and this is it right here. And this was frozen. I couldn't turn it. So there's a little cap here on the top, and I popped that off, and you can see the top bushing, and I dropped a little 3-in-1 oil in there. I figured it's already ruined. What's that going to hurt? So I've loosened it up some, but I plug it in, and all that happens is it gets hot, and the new resistor I put in there gets hot. So that's no good. So disconnected it again, and I ran down to a parts store a couple miles from here, and they had a blower motor, some off-brand, and I put it in, and it worked on high, and I put it in the parking lot at the parts store, drove home with it on high, and it vibrated so bad my hands were about numb by the time I got here. So I took it back out, turned around, and went and got my money back. So this is Sunday. Tomorrow's Monday, of course. I'm going to go to the junkyard. Not too many places around here have anything other than the Chinese blower motors. So I'm going to hit the junkyard, and I'm sure they probably got a couple Tahoes with blower motors. As far as the speeds, I'm not sure what to think about that. It could be the control module in the dash. If I can get a deal, maybe I'll get the blower motor and the controls at the same time. If it's not really expensive, I figure I don't have a meter. It'd be nice to have all that stuff working on the way home. So we'll see what happens. So that's where we are, and I'll kick it around some more tomorrow. And just stopped at a local boneyard and got a factory blower, used of course, but I put it in and it worked, and no shakes, no rattles, rolls, but I still had the issue with it only working on high. So I took the blower resistor back out and I took it back to the auto parts store that I got it. I had two options yesterday when I was there, and I figured, well, this one didn't work, and after doing some reading online, there were some people that had complained about the fact, or I shouldn't say complained, but had issue with the fact that they had faulty resistor assembly. So I went back and swapped it out, and I put it in my truck. So I put the boneyard blower motor in it, I put in a swap resistor, and I have all speeds now. So we're good with that. I also stopped at a local Chevy dealership this morning, GMC dealership, and to get the switch for the brake light and cruise control switch that's up by the brake pedal. They're going to have it by 12:30, and right now it's 11:30. So I'm going to take out the one that's in the car right now so that I can just have it ready, so when I go to pick it up I can just stop it and put it in, because I've done these before. There's just a bolt and a clip, and it's not that hard. So I'll try to get that on video here in a minute. But I'm not crazy about having no brake lights, and hopefully that's all it is. I might check the bulbs before I go just to make sure there's no problem there. But we're moving along, getting some of these little issues fixed. You know, this could be why I got the car so cheap, truck so cheap. If you know how, while these are annoying little issues, I'm sure if you know, they're not that hard to fix. If you don't know how and you have to go to a dealer or a mechanic, you can start talking about some real money. I might have, I don't know, $200 maybe $250 with blower motor, resistor package, some windshield wiper blades. I'm trying to think, there was probably another thing I fixed, but again, it's not difficult stuff. But if you don't know which way to turn a wrench, or just that kind of stuff doesn't interest you, it can get expensive in a hurry. So hopefully this helps some of you out there. And if not, these seem to be pretty common problems with GM vehicles. And again, not that these parts aren't really expensive. This isn't a Lamborghini or anything, but can be annoying and time consuming if you got to keep running to a dealer or a garage. So hopefully some of these things help you, and keep your truck running and do it inexpensively. Alright, I'm going to get started on that brake switch now.